Dr. Suneeb Anil Bansal has more than 15 years of diverse experience in the industry, research laboratories, and academia. He has served in key positions in key projects like automobile development at Hero MotoCorp, fighter aircraft development at DRDO, nanomaterials and manufacturing development at various universities. His research interest is in the field of micro and nano manufacturing, materials, graphene and 2D materials, polymers and metal composite materials, and sensing, etc. Presently, he is an assistant professor and head of the Nano Micro Manufacturing and Materials Research Group at Maharaja Agrasen University. He has published more than 20 research papers and holds one patent and has served as expert for a number of journals. So I request Dr. Suneep Anil Bansal to please share his expertise with us. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Pooja, for giving such a nice introduction. Rather, sometimes I don't know how many publications I have. Generally, I visit these kind of talks, then I come to know about all this. So, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
So, first of all, let me get the presentation. Uh, Let me put it in a full screen mode. Sometimes it won't work. Actually, I am not getting sharing rights, I think. Just got it. Okay, I hope
Yes,
it
sir.
is visible to everyone.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. First of all, my gratitude to all of you for this workshop. Part of this actually talk on analysis. From my point of view, these guys are more expert than me. So I will cover the engineering aspects. So my talk will be diffraction, and I'll not cover the basics of this because all fundamentals are already being known to these applied science guys. So my justice to the topic is going to give you how this is used as a characterization tools and what kind of a characterization we can get out of it, what kind of values we can actually get out of it. So a special thank to Dr. Priyanka who really invited me for this talk. So please accept my acknowledgement for that. So
Thank you,
this
sir.
is going to be part. Okay, this is going to be a part of one week workshop, material and characterization. My part is going to be in 3 to 4. I have 30 to 40 slides. Earlier it was a 90-minute lecture, so I have cut down a few of the slides and a few of the characterization I have dropped. So otherwise, if you get a chance to present this in later stage, I'll do present that also. So I'll show you what kind of a characterization that can we get out from XRD are going to be covered over here. Okay. So it is going to be 40-50 minutes. I'll devote to my presentation, and I hope you are going to have a lot of questions because XRD is a very vast characterization tool, and I hope every kind of a person who actually deals with materials always use this kind of a tool. So there are ample amount of questions you must be having in your mind. I hope most of that can be answered, or if few of that cannot be answered right now, I maybe do it later stage. No issues with that. So these are my contact details. Even if you are not able to ask any kind of a question over here, you can call me, you can send me a mail, I will reply. Okay. A brief outline of this is because the audience is from diverse fields. So first of all, I'll give you a familiarization about XRD equipment, what kind of equipment is being used, how the equipment looks like, and what kind of reports we get from XRD guy. If you visit some kind of XRD lab, the lab guy is going to ask you for some kind of and give that sample to that guy, and that guy is going to give you how the report looks like, how the equipment looks like. Then we understand what is XRA, why only the XRA is being used, then what is the property of XRA that is being used to get the characterization, and then finally what kind of a characterization tool we are doing and what kind of output we can get out of it. So I'll give few of the examples. So examples will include a classical crystallographical analysis. One or two examples are pertaining to crystallographical analysis, and one example I have added for a other kind of analysis that we can get. Okay, last is acknowledgement. So as a legal duty, let me actually read out a disclaimer statement. At this time, it is declared that all the material posted, produced, displayed here solely to be used for academic purposes, host, guest, department, university, or anybody may or may not be full owner. Any reproduction can only be done if you have a copyright license with the original holder. It is also declared that it is a purely academic activity, no commercial things are going on. To the best of my knowledge or our knowledge, every source is duly cited and presenter acknowledge all sources too. So we do have some kind of a conflict of interest that I will share at the end of the presentation. First of all, we should understand it happens when you actually in a research field, you give sample to somebody, you get the results, and you use these results for your reports, for your thesis, for your dissertation, and for your understanding. But lot many guys, even half of the guys I came across with the XRD kind of analysis has never seen any kind of XRD equipment. So let us first understand how the equipment looks like. So right hand side is a equipment that is being used for XRD analysis. So just to understand this equipment, on the right hand side I put a schematic diagram of this. This is a Simantu machine that I have taken from their website. So typically it is a there is one X-ray source. X-ray source is firing a X-ray on a sample, and from that sample somehow that X-ray is being diffracted or reflected, whatever you can say it. There is some detector you can actually detect. I will show you this. There is some detector on it. So this is the detector. So detector detects the reflected or a diffracted beam. So from that diffracted beam, we understand what kind of a sample we have. But few of the properties for the sample we can actually calculate. Here detector is there. This is the detector and the source, and this is the sample order, same over here. So this is a typical XRD machine, X-ray diffractometer it is called, X-ray diffraction machine. This machine, by company, manufacturer or the model you use, there can be a slight changes, but still the basic equipment is going to remain same like this only. So whenever you visit any kind of a characterization lab, you should, by looking at the equipment, can understand what kind of a XRD machine they are using. Okay. Next is, these are the kind of reports you actually get. So these are the kind of reports you get once you are going to get a report. So it can be in an Excel sheet data. The x-axis they are going to give you a 2 theta value. So 2 theta is the angle which I have shown you, the angle between the source and the detector. So whatever angle they are making between source and detector is known as 2 theta angle. So this is one thing we are going to get. Second thing is we are going to get is intensity. Intensity is always an arbitrary unit. Arbitrary means we are not actually quantifying the quantity units. So the actual value is not relevant for XRD analysis, but relative heights of peak do have some kind of a relevance. I'll share few of the things for that. So whenever you are going to get a XRD report, they are going to give you two values. First is 2D theta and corresponding peak. From this data, you can calculate lot many things. You can calculate the height of each peak. You can calculate the width of each peak. Okay, just one more report I have. This is the second kind of example. So you can clearly see three peaks over here. So three peaks, from these three peaks we can get a lot of data. So three ways from an XRD sample you can get the data. First is location of the peak, where the peak is actually located. So one data we can get from that. Second is intensity of the peak. Rather than intensity, relative intensity of the peak. We can get small amount of data from that also. And then comes the width of the peak. So the more wider peak is going to give you other type of analysis rather than a shorter type of width. So in this presentation, I am only going to cover the location of the peak, because 80 to 90% location of the peak is being used to get the information. For other things, I'll give you the glimpse how it is being used and how we are going to get data from that. But location of the peak, I am going to calculate or give you the data how it is being done. Next is introduction to X-ray. First of all, we should understand why we are using X-ray. Why only X-ray? So let us. X-ray is an electromagnetic wave with a wavelength similar to that of chemical bond. So our chemical bonds, crystallographic structures for atomic distance, are the range of sub-nanometer. So same way the X-ray we are using has a wavelength of that order. That's why we generally use it. Technically, why this should be same, I will show you in the Bragg law. Why this should be same or in a similar region. So it was first produced by lab. I will not go into the history of it. So we bombard an electron on a metal target, and according to the property of the metal, X-ray is being produced. So every metal has a characteristic peak, X-ray peak for different kinds of a sample. I will show you few of the metals which are used for X-ray. Then X-ray is produced by decay of the electron excites. These all are theories. Electron excite to the higher energy, then it comes back to the parent state and X-ray is being produced. There can be several wavelengths for X-rays. So this is the basic mechanism, how it is being used. This is a schematic equipment. This is not the original equipment being used on the right hand side. This is a schematic diagram. Okay, this is the theory behind it. So you are giving electron, you are putting the electron over here, you are actually exciting the electron. When electron is going to come back, it is going to give you a characteristic peak. And on metals, normally molybdenum and copper is being used as an X-ray source. So copper has two peaks, K alpha. K alpha is 1.54, in the range of 1.54 Armstrong or 0.154 nanometer, and K beta is 1.39. So most of the cases we use K alpha. As far as I understand, I never came across any kind of XRD equipment where we use some other type of source. So copper is most widely used metal to produce X-ray for XRD diffractometer. Then there are molybdenum also. Molybdenum give you in a range of 0.7 Armstrong, 0.71 Armstrong, and 0.63 Armstrong. As a requirement of XRD diffractometer, we should have only one peak, only one ray of only one wavelength. So what do we do? There are two peaks in major peaks in copper copper X-ray. So we put a nickel filter over here. But what is going to do? It is going to filter out the K beta peak. So once that K beta peak is being filtered out, we are only left with the K alpha or K alpha 2 peak. So K alpha peak is in a range of 0.15, which is actually the range of all the atomic distances we are looking to measure using the X-ray method. Okay, then How we measure it? We measure it using a diffraction method. So what is diffraction? Let us understand the diffraction now. So whenever any particle is bombarded with any kind of X-ray, so there is going to be a scattering. Scattering means the ray is going to be diverted into different angles. But in scattering itself, the intensity of this intensity of this scattering is directional. Few of the directions are going to have a very large intensity. So if same thing is going to happen with the crystal, if crystal is going to be oriented one, so what is going to happen? We are going to get a directional signal. Directional signal means if it is highly oriented, few of the things that are being diffracted in particular angle are going to add up. So for a wavelength to add up, we should have a wave with a in phase wave. So for having an in phase wave, we should have a distance between the atoms that should be in the order of the wavelength. So that way, this diffraction, rather than in few of the XRD text, whenever you go, whenever you see this analysis, sometimes it is also written as reflection. More or less, these are interchangeable terms only for XRD analysis, because the Nobel Prize is given for this XRD method, and that text actually used it as a reflection. Otherwise, if you go technically, it is a diffraction method. Beam is diffracted, not reflected. Scattering is random arrangement of atom in the space. If there is a random arrangement, we are going to get a signal in all the directions. But we don't want, we are actually checking a crystal which is oriented and highly oriented. So that's why we get a directional peak signal. Those directional peak signals are captured, okay, by atom arranged periodically in the space in few of the specific directions, satisfying the Bragg law. I'll show you the Bragg law. Strong intensities of the scattered beam can be captured. So one thing more, you are getting a very high signal in few of the direction, but the maximum intensity of the XRD can only be captured at the transmission. So these detectors are not put in the transmission line because that signal is very high. So this is always that the detector is always kept at some amount of angle. So we never test transmission signal from XRD equipment. So no stack scattering. There are few of the requirements that need to be fulfilled to get the XRD signal. Next comes the interference. So to get a very strong signal, if n number of crystals are actually giving you a diffraction beam, so these all beams should be in phase. In phase means their crust and trough should match. So this is the basic condition to get a diffracted signal. So once these are going to be in phase, the signal is going to add up. If anyhow these signals are not in phase, we are not going to get a very strong signal. So the XRD equipment can only be used if we are able to make the arrangement in which diffracted beams always remain in phase. So once they are going to remain in phase, we are going to calculate the signal. So there are two conditions. First condition is crystal should diffract. Crystal or a material which you want to actually test should diffract the light. Second condition is that diffracted beam should be in phase. Only then we are going to get some amount of analysis or some amount of analysis beam from it. So let us understand how we quantify it, how we use it as a characterization tool. So we understand we need a X-ray beam. X-ray beam because it is in the order of atomic distances. So that's why we are using X-ray beam. We use copper X-ray beam. Mostly we use copper X-ray beam. So that is 4 is the kind of wavelength it has. Then third condition we should satisfy, all the diffracted beams should be in phase. So now we'll try to find out how we get data out of it. So first you all should understand XRD only calculates the atom to atom distance. So lot of reports sometimes we come across, you get the XRD data and you claim there is a change in bonding. If I am a reviewer of your paper, so my genuine query about this is going to be how you can claim there is a change in a bond, because XRD do not identify XRD identifies distance. So you should somehow relate the atom bonding change in distance, the change in length of the something like that to the distance XRD. Only then it is going to be a credible characterization for your domain. Okay, so now we'll try to understand how we are going to calculate the interplanar distances. The interplanar distances is this is the first time two Bragg father and son actually presented this. They did not invented the X-ray, neither they invented the diffraction. Although invention of X-ray got Nobel Prize and invention of diffraction also got Nobel Prize, but using both of these methods, Bragg developed a characterization tool that is known as XRD, and they also got the Nobel Prize for this. Although they never invented X-ray, neither they invented diffraction. They used both the methods. So this is a very simple theory they proposed. They proposed that if there are two atoms, if we have two atoms, this is atom 1, this is atom 2, and there is an X-ray beam, this X-ray is coming from this side, so it is getting diffracted from this place, and this is also diffracted from this place. Okay, so these both beams should add up. Once they are going to add up, the intensity of signal is going to increase. The nature of this atom and this atom is same. If the nature of both the atom is same, then the diffraction angle is to be the same. So if diffraction angle is going to be the same, if by somehow I am able to give the wavelength to this electromagnetic wave like this, okay, these two beams should always be in phase, I will be able to calculate the distance between the atoms. So this is the theory they used. So other things are by simple geometry you can calculate lambda is going to be 2d sine theta. N is the order. There can be 1, 2, 3, 4. There are thousands of the atoms in one orientation. When you are going to focus a beam on this crystal, so what is going to happen? Lot of diffraction beams are going to be phase and going to give you a very strong signal in some particular direction. So from here you should understand that lambda is fixed. Say I am using copper K alpha beam, so I am already having 1.54. So this is fixed. This thing is fixed. So this is the interplanar distance. This I am calculating from here. That I want to calculate. So this is only dependent upon theta. So this is only dependent upon, this is 2 theta. This is only dependent upon theta. So as the theta varies, the distance between two atoms is going to vary. Or if there is a variation in distance between two atoms, then I am going to get a focused beam at a different angle. So this is the property they used. By this property, they are able to calculate the interplanar spacing. They are calculate the interplanar spacing. This is one plane, this is second plane, and they are able to calculate interplanar spacing. This interplanar spacing was at the order of sub-nanometer range. In 1900, when this technique was developed, there was few of the theories that how crystal is being oriented. Once this came to picture, so they come to know how crystal is being formed, what is the orientation of that, how much atoms are placed at what distance, what kind of atoms are being placed. Because if they are going to be a different kind of atoms, So they are going to diffract beam at a different angles. So if you are getting a diffraction of beam at a different angle, it means there is a change in atom. Or you are not getting any kind of a signal, it means there is change in atom. So you can calculate d spacing. We understand from our normal physics, h square, k square, l square. You can calculate the space, you can calculate the d. So these both Bragg father and son calculated the crystal structure of lot of atoms. So they were awarded Nobel Prize for development of this concept and then solving number of and their spacing, which were otherwise being postulated. This is the same. If you are going to increase the number of atoms, the signal is going to add up more. So similarly, if d is proportional to theta, d is inversely proportional to theta. As I am going to increase the angle, the d is going to decrease. Okay. This is geometry of Bragg law. The incident beam normal to the reflection plane. They are using the term reflection. Otherwise, it is a diffraction mechanism. So, as to make you more understand about the concept, I may be using a loosely fit term rather than a correct term. That's why I use the word reflection over here. Otherwise, it is a diffracted beam. So when number of beams are being added up, so we call it a reflection plane from where it is being reflected or diffracted. So this reflected plane can be calculated now. Now we know how to calculate it. We can calculate the distance between two planes. So because the plane is highly oriented, the more orientation we have, the more number of planes I am going to have in that direction, the intensity of beam is going to increase. So if there are 5 planes in that, and if there are 20 planes in the same, so I am going to get 4 times intensity. This is the way I can actually use intensity of the beam. So the location of the beam is going to give me data, say what is the distance between two planes. Okay. So next is, obviously there are few of the arrangements in which we are not going to get any kind of a signal. So why we are not going to get any kind of a signal? If you can see over here, so the distance between two planes is d, and d lambda is in order of d. So if there is an atom in between here, so I am talking about BCC crystal, this is a BCC crystal. So what is going to happen now? The lambda is not in the order of d. So because it is d by 2. So rather than having a constructive interference, what is going to happen? I am going to get the destructive interference. Now it is going to be a phase difference. There is a phase difference. So what is going to happen? Now it is going to signal out. The signal is going to be nullified. Okay. So there are more than 30 type of peaks we can get in XRD, but depending upon arrangement of the atom, there are few of the things that are not at all present in that. So for example, for a BCC structure, if there is a body-centered atom present, so you are not going to get any kind of a reflection from 100. So we call it systematic absences. Depending upon the arrangement, logically, there can be few of the systematic absences. But in this, we can get reflection for 200. It is possible. Okay. So it is not, even if you are able to satisfy all the conditions, like there is a diffraction present, there is a beam in range, still you may not get all the data what you are actually expecting from it. Okay. So we call it systematic absence. These are the systematic absences. Absences means these are the things you only these kind of a planes are actually going to be present. So these you can see in BCC we are not going to get any kind of a reflection from 100. it is not present for BCC, but 200 is present. There is a reflection from 200. Okay, so these, whenever you are going for any kind of a structure, this much planes are going to give you signal. Other planes are not going to give you signal even if they are present because of systematic absences. So other way how we are going to get data out of it, so is, say there are two atoms, and distance between these two atoms is say d. Okay, this is the normal signal for this. So I am getting d, so corresponding d I am getting the theta. So what is going to happen, say if there is some kind of a strain present over here. Strain means the atom to atom distance has either increased or decreased. Say if it is increased, we are going to get a left shift. Left shift means the d distance is increased. So once we are the d is going to increase, the theta is going to decrease. Okay, so the more you are going closer to the y-axis, the distance is going to increase. Now if your angle is left shifted means there can be some type of strain in the atom. If it is right shifted, there can be some kind of compressive strain in the atom. Both, there can be tensile or compressive. So even that strain in the order of sub-nanometer range can be measured using the location of the peak only. Okay, if there are few of the atoms in stress, few of the atoms in strain. So what is going to happen? Rather than having a very sharp peak, we are going to have a dome. Dome means this much area is under tension, this is under tension, and this much area is under compression, and this area is unaffected. So this is also one of the way we can use shape, and we can interpret data from shape also. I am just giving you one example of this. You can also check the orientation of the grain. Grain orientation can also be checked. Grain size can also be checked. Although those signals are not going to be that much strong, but still we can calculate it. Okay, there are defect lines can also be calculated. Okay, so there are a lot of data can be calculated from location of the peak itself. So let us take few examples. Depending upon our understanding till now, we understand that XRD can actually calculate the distance between the atom. The more the periodicity there is going to be, the more stronger and sharper signal we are going to get. It itself means if my peak is sharp, the material is crystalline. If my peak is not very sharp, the material is not crystalline, or somehow atoms are not being oriented symmetrically or periodically. So this is also one of the judgment you can take from our XRD chart. So I will take few of the examples. Two examples I will take for crystallographical analysis. Whenever you go to any kind of a book, so XRD is termed as XRD crystallographical analysis. But there are other kind of things we use for XRD also, although this is also dependent upon distance between two planes. So let us take the first example. So one example I will take how we can actually think of where we can actually get a peak of XRD. So if there is some kind of a crystal, I have taken this crystal. So this crystal has there is a plane 400 plane. There is a periodicity in 400 plane, and the distance between 400 plane is 1.467. So that I already know. Now I want to check whether my material is okay or not. So what I am going to do, I am going to calculate what kind of theta angle at 2 theta angle I am going to get the signal. So from this Bragg's law, I can calculate a 2a sine theta m alpha. We can drop m. So by calculating this, I came to know theta should come near to 31.67. So what is going to happen? I'll take my sample to XRD guy and I'll ask him to actually perform XRD for this. So I am going to get a signal, as I have shown you. I'll get a signal, I will get a graph or a data where I can get 2 theta value and intensity. So by nature of my material, I should get a of plane in 400 direction is going to be very, very high. This is the signal we get. So there are a lot of other peaks also, but I want to concentrate only on my question. So this is the peak I was looking for. So this is a very sharp peak. This is a 400 plane peak and very, very sharp peak. So 3.167, where it should be placed. This is placed near the 3.167. So this is the way I can actually check my material. So many times, there are few of the famous jewelers. If you go to these jewelers, they have a small XRD setup as a tabletop. So if you want to understand whether you are carrying a gold or copper or something like that, they perform the XRD of that, and you can actually identify the material. We are identifying material based on a characteristic distance between atom to atom. So this is the way we can actually identify the material from the distance between atom to atom only. Okay. So next example we can take the planes. So how the plane is being oriented to the beam, we can get different signals for different branes, like we have here a signal 100. So this is the orientation of the plane. So the peak is near to 21 or 22. Okay, this is the intercranial distance. Similarly, I am getting other peaks also over here. So every peak is corresponds to different kind of a plane. So one thing more I just want to convey over here. For every 100 plane, there is always a peak for 200 also. So the intensity of 100 peak is going to be higher. You can see over here, and intensity of peak 200 is going to be lesser. Similarly, you can have, if there is a 1-1 plane, you can have a peak for 2-2 also, if it is coming into that range. So that if there is a very small peak here, then intensity of that peak is going to be little lesser, because logically the number of planes 100 have, 200 plane logically going to have much smaller numbers. Okay, we call it second order, third order kind of a plane, which we can see over here. So this is the second example how we can actually interpret the location of the peak. So where peak is located. Let us revisit what we have seen sample results in the starting. So just understand, this is actual peak, actual XRD peak. So you can see the material I have chosen, deliberately chosen, is BCC. This is a BCC structure. So BCC structure, we don't have any peak for 100. So this is a peak. This we call it systematic absence. This is a systematic absence. Okay, but second order we got it. This is a second order peak. Sometimes if there is a systematic absence of first order, second order peak also is also being labeled as 100. This happens lot many times. It is acceptable. So you can write it as a 100 peak also, because it is showing 200. Otherwise it is not 200 peak, 100 peak, sorry. Okay. Similarly, now we understand why we are writing it 100, because we are going to calculate the D distance. So this is D100, D200 and D211. So our theoretical knowledge plus XRD analysis should match, and then only we can interpret results. Although it can interpret bondings also, how bonds are being formed, how bonds are being attached, still that should be on the basis of distance between atoms, distance between planes. That should not be looked like into, because this XRD peak is placed over here, that's why the bond is being formed. That should not be interpreted like that. Similarly, we can revisit second thing that I already shared with you. So this thing I actually shown you because I just wanted to show you the relative intensities. See this, look at this picture, this plane and this plane. So relative intensity is increasing. The relative intensity is more. So by relative intensity, you can actually calculate, you can also see over here, the relative intensity, this and this are different. All the material is somehow similar. So I am not taking any specific material name over here, because our motivation over here is to actually understand the XRD. So what happens, say if you have 10 planes in one orientation, say 100. 100 have 10 planes, and there is another plane, say 110. 110 has a 20 planes. So if 10 plane is giving you some kind of intensity, 20 plane should give you intensity more than 10 planes. Okay, so this should be fixed also. So by relative density, I should know that the occurrence of 100 and 110. So if it is changing, it means there are changes taking place in number of planes. Number of planes are either increasing or number of planes are either decreasing. So by relative heights of these XRD peaks, I am able to interpret relative changes in number of planes. This can also be interpreted. If your peaks are sharp, if had it been be like this, it means it is very crystalline. So your material is here. It is material is a little bit amorphous side, but now it is having a little crystalline side. So these are the two examples I have shown you in the starting. I hope from that now you can interpret all the XRD peaks, how these are located, why these are located at this place. One more thing I want to tell you, as you are moving towards y-axis, so the interplanar distance is increasing. So if some peak is at 40 degrees Celsius and some peak is at 10 degrees Celsius, it means 10 degree peak has rather large distances than 40 degree peak. So we call it left shift and right shift. If there is a left shift, it means the interplanar distances is increasing. If there is a right shift, then it means interplanar distances are decreasing. Let me take the last example. The earlier example we worked for are only to calculate the crystallographical images. Right now I will show you one of the example which we actually use in our lab is for graphite. So we use this graphite material to manufacture graphene. So what is going to happen? The interplanar distance in graphite and interplanar distance in graphene is the same. But my point is I want to reach from graphite to graphene. So what we do, there is one intermediate stage that we call it graphene oxide. The distance between graphene oxide is larger. Interplanar distance between graphene oxide is larger. So what we do, we take the XRD sample of graphite. Once I am going to take the XRD sample of a graphite, I'll start performing the experiment. Intermediately, when I came to know graphene oxide is being prepared or manufactured, I'll take the XRD analysis. Now from this black line, I have reached over here because interplanar distance is changing. So this is approximately 0.3 and this is approximately 0.9. Okay, this is oxide form, but I am interested in this graphene form. What I am going to do, I am again going to continue the process. So ultimately I will reach over here. Although both of the location of both of these peaks are going to coincide, but I know this is going to come from here. Second thing is graphite is highly crystalline. Graphene is not that much crystalline. So we are just using the property of XRD to actually identify our material. This XRD analysis is only related to how the change in distance is taking place during the process. Similarly, you can see over here. So graphene oxide is crystalline and has a very sharp peak. Once I am going to release the oxygen from the graphene sheets, you get a RGO, reduced graphene oxide. Location of peak of a parent material and the final material is same, but DOM is different. In intermediate step, the graphite should change from graphite oxide and then to reduced graphene oxide. For lot many analysis in 2D space for MOS2 and other materials also. So we use this XRD analysis so that we can understand the kind of changes we are taking place in the material. So whenever I am going to write about this, I should convey to the editor that I am claiming the synthesis of RGO because the interplanar distances has came back to that position that there should be. I should not directly write it like because the location of the peak is over here. That's why a reduced graphene oxide has been synthesized. So this is the few of the example I wanted to give you. So these are the acknowledgement. These all are my lab members. So they have contributed for every kind of assignment I do. This is conflict of interest statement. We do have few of the conflict of interest. It is declared that presenter and relative group have potential and competing interest to develop nanomaterial based products. We do develop few of the products. Group has vital potential competing interest to develop nanomaterial based paints, coating and other products. They are also looking to develop few of the cosmetics. So every participant should do its due diligence before taking any view or takeaway from this presentation. So as a statutory warning, I am just sharing it with you. So if you have any question, it's most welcome. You can call me any kind of a question you have. So I hope there are 10 to 15 minutes. To ask any question, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your talk. It was a very valuable and very well explained talk, but there are some queries which I would like to ask on the behalf of the participants. So, one of the participants want to know which type of filter will be used to neglect K beta peaks.
Nickel filter. I have shown it on the slide.
Okay.
So for copper, there are different kind of filters being used for different kind of arrangements. So particularly for this, for copper type of X-ray, we use nickel filter. So I have written over here, nickel. So nickel absorbs K beta. So once it is going to absorb K beta peak, there is K alpha peak. Although there are two K alpha peak, K alpha 1 and K alpha 2, these are closely placed. Still we are using it as it is. This is a very I say cost effective equipment rather than other kind of X-ray machines we use.
Okay. Thank you, sir. The next question is why BCC lattice doesn't have a 100 peak?
I already explained you. Just show me. Because to get any kind of a diffraction beam intensity, the distance between two planes should be in an order of wavelength. So if in a BCC structure, say I am using 0.154 beam and distance say is equal to 0.154. So what is going to happen, in the middle of it, there is one atom, which is going to give me a peak, which is going to be half of the wavelength of my actual peak. So what is going to happen? They are both of these beam, this blue beam and this red beam, by nature of its position, are always going to be out of phase. So once these are going to be out of phase, these both signal when add up is going to give you nil signal. That's why this is absent. There are a lot of other planes which are absent, but I have taken the example of BCC. But we can get second order reflection from it. That's why I told you sometimes we see a BCC structure, we see a XRD. So there is a reflection from 200 plane. Still, they write it 100. This is by a virtue of nature or XRD analysis, or say acceptance by research community. It is written as 100. It is correct. Otherwise, you actually calculate the d distance. To this, it is going to give you twice the d distance you have in 100.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Next question is, uh, how do we calculate the quantitative value of stress from the XRD data?
Okay, that I have not covered in this presentation. My whole actually intention over here was to uh, show you how the material is being identified, or the how the peak position is located. So in some other presentation, if we have, I'll explain that also.
Okay,
Otherwise, it
sir.
is being
Okay, fine.
calculated from width of the peak and height of the peak.
Okay, sir. Okay, sure. Sir, what
Relative
is the
quantification.
significance of the
Uh, so
Hello?
please carry.
Sir, what is the significance of the double peak which we sometimes obtain in the
I
XRD data?
didn't, I didn't
Is
get
it
you.
double peak? So when we are
Double peak.
analyzing the XRD data, sometimes we get a double peak. Like in the example you have shown, there are two very equidistant close peaks, double peak.
So
The
double peak is,
significance.
as I have told you, sometimes it happens. Say, if I have a crystal, I have bent the crystal. I have taken the example of bend. Just give me. So over here, if there is strain like this, okay. So the top
Yes.
layer of this is in tensile stress, and bottom layer of this is in a compressive stress. If the amount of tensile stress is very high and amount of compressive stress is very high, there is a possibility, there are very few atoms on the neutral axis. That's why there can be appearance of two peaks. Sometimes appearance of two peaks can also come by having, let's say I have carbon, so I have few of the atoms which are very close to carbon also present over there. There is a small difference between carbon atoms and other atoms. That's why we can have number of peaks in that case.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much for the queries, answering the queries. It was a very valuable talk and very nicely explained. I thank you on the behalf of Department of Physics for being the part
Dr.
of this
Pooja,
workshop. Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Pooja, there is one more question, I think, last question in the group. Kindly check it.
Okay, ma'am. I'll check. Okay, the last question is, can we predict the structure of a crystal from XRD image like tetragonal, cubic, or orthorhombic?
Yes, very much possible.
Yes, sir.
So for example, if you are going for a BCC and you are going for FCC, just for all the planes where the face centered atom is present, calculate the distance for that. If that distance is present in the XRD peak, it means it is a FCC crystal. If that peak is absent, it means it is not a FCC crystal.
Okay.
It is very much possible.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your sparing some valuable time with us and sharing your expertise with the participants. I hope everyone would have benefited from your talk. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.